Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a DFS review for the 2021 Zurich Classic. Now, before I get in the video, I want to remind you guys there are timestamps in the description below. Those timestamps can also be found on YouTube's progress bar. So if you're on desktop, just hover your mouse over it. On mobile, click and drag your finger up and down that progress bar. You'll get the timestamps that way. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to bring up the results page. And what I have to admit is I didn't get to watch a lot of this golf tournament. I did catch the last, I caught the playoff, like the very last bits of the playoff between Mark Leishman, Cam Smith, and Louis Oosthuizen and Charles Schwartzel. Other than that, I didn't really get an opportunity to watch this tournament. I had a very busy weekend, so I don't have any narratives to give you guys other than the playoff part of it. It didn't seem very close. I mean, Charles Schwartzel and Louis Oosthuizen had like a 7-foot putt that if they had converted, it would have pushed it to another playoff event or another playoff hole. And obviously they didn't get it done because I would be talking about a second playoff hole or maybe third one or whatever. But yeah, Cam Smith won this tournament once again as a team event. The first time he won this was with Jonas Blixt. The second one is now obviously with fellow Aussie Mark Leishman. Cam Smith, if you watch the preview and the strategy video, was definitely, that team was definitely one that I was trying to build my lineups around. I was very high on Cam Smith, so it's good that those types of touts paid off. On DraftKings, I did pretty decent. I made my money back plus a little bit more. I didn't put a lot of investment in, but it felt good to actually have a decent showing here. And when we get into the kind of like the review of the strategy video piece of this, you'll see that the pieces were there. We could have built a pretty decent lineup following some of the sweet spot rules and logic. So let's go ahead and get into the next piece of this, and we will talk about the optimal lineup versus the $5 GPP winning lineup. So the $5 GPP, the Drive the Green tournament was the highest entry fee that I played in this week. Didn't make any money in that contest. I only put a single bullet in, kind of my lottery ticket. But the $5 GPP winning lineup, I'm just going to talk about the guys that they selected. Obviously, you could have selected the opposing teammate, not the opposing, but the teammate, and it would have worked all the same because they were the same salary, they scored the same points. But I'm just going to select the guys that the winning lineup had. Obviously, the winner with Cameron Smith. That's number 1. Number 2 is Richie Werenski. Keegan Bradley's 3rd. Brant Snedeker's 4th. Wyndham Clark 5th. And Kyle Stanley was 6th. If you remember the preview video, I talked about KH Lee and Kyle Stanley. I'm like, I don't know if we can really get there, right? Because I don't think they make enough birdies. Well, they were in the GPP winning lineup. And I'll tell you this too. When I was creating lineups with my optimizer, I ended up putting in the logic to be able to select just one of the guys from the team. KH Lee showed up a lot. He was the easiest. He was my highest ranked 6K golfer, and I wasn't so much thinking I needed a 6K golfer, but he just kept showing up. So I played him in like 15% of my lineups, and if you follow me and know how I select lineups, I really don't like to go over 10% in the 6K salary range, but I think we kind of had to because the pricing was dumb, if I'm going to be honest. It was really dumb. If anyone out there has any logical conclusions as to why the pricing was the way it was, I'm all ears, and I will definitely accept logical information, but it didn't make sense with some of these high-priced guys. Cam Smith and Mark Leishman were 1,100 or 11,000. I think when we talked about it, there were 18 golfers that were 10K and above, which would, translate to 9 golfers if this was a normal tournament, which is 3 more than average, 3 more than usual. I think it's between 5 to 6 golfers are usually 10K and above in a DK lineup. And for a team event, now we have 18, again, translating to 9. It didn't make sense to me. So I think we needed 6K golfers. I think we needed to have that mindset we need to go in with the idea we needed 6K golfers. I just didn't know how many. So that was the $5 GPP winning lineup, the optimal lineup. Cam Smith. So it's basically all the golfers with black tick marks on the top right hand corner of their box. This includes the entire team. Cam Smith, Mark Leishman equals one golfer. You could have selected either of them and they were your optimal lineup. Or selected either one of them to put in the optimal lineup and it would have worked out since they scored the same amount of points. Obviously, you can see that highlighted here. But you would have needed the team of Cam Smith, Mark Leishman as number 1. 2, you needed Louis Oosthuizen, Charles Schwartzel. 3, you needed Richie Werenski and Peter Uihlein, who Peter Uihlein had won the tournament just prior to this on the Korn Ferry tournament, so the week prior. So it might be worth considering that piece of information whenever we do a preview or a strategy video, just to see how someone has done either on the Korn Ferry Tour or the European Tour the week before. But Peter Uihlein coming in with, good form. So he was coming in pretty hot. Our 4th golfer was Brant Snedeker and Keith Mitchell. Our 5th golfer was Bryce Garnett, or the team of Bryce Garnett and Scott Stallings. And then the last one was the team of Doug Gim and Justin Suh. So if we're looking at this at home, you needed an 11K golfer, a 9K golfer, 1-7, 2-7, 2-7K golfers, a 6K, and an 8K. This follows the logic I'm pretty sure I said on the strategy video. Just find a 10K and above golfer, a 9K, an 8K, 2 7s, and a 6. And that is exactly how it worked out, how it shook out this week. Crazy how often that hits. But that is kind of your general lineup construction you want to do when it just comes based off of salaries. Now, we couldn't talk about historical salaries because this was the first contest DraftKings has done for the Zurich Classic. And it's really the first team event that it has done. So really, I didn't know exactly where to start. It's just kind of a generic piece of advice to give to say, hey, let's go 11 or 10 up, 9, 8, 2 7s, and a 6. But again, we see that on average more often than not, winning, a GPP or being in the optimal lineup. So that is, it's good to see that. Now, one other thing I should mention is Doug Gim and Justin Suh could easily be replaced with Tyler Duncan and Adam Schenk because they scored the same amount of points. It's just that Duncan and Schenk were $1,300 cheaper. I always like to try to find the closest to 50,000. That's what I'm always aiming for. That's what I'm always trying to tell you guys. You don't want to leave that much money on the table. It doesn't really matter. More like you can win GPPs even if they aren't the optimal lineup by sticking as close to 50,000 as possible. We typically see it this week. Obviously, the GPP winning lineups used all 50,000 of their salary. Optimal lineup, we'll call it optimal lineup 1. Used all but 100. Optimal lineup number 2 would have used all but 1,600. So this would, obviously you just minus 1,300 from this and you'd get 48.6. So yeah, here's a piece that I'm going to start making sure I incorporate. I'm going to continue talking about the optimal lineup as we go through this. I usually just end it right there. But I want to talk as we recap the bucket summary or the bucket system with strokes gained buckets and all that good stuff. I want to come back and see if we could have gotten to the optimal lineup using kind of the bucket system strategy that I provided during the strategy video. So first of all, I want to go and look at the strokes gained buckets first. I color coordinated based off of buckets this week. Forgot to resize all of these, not all of them, but all the positions, but bear with me and we'll get through this. But I did color code all of the strokes gained, or all the golfers based off of their strokes gained stats. So your strokes gained 1s were this dark green, strokes gained 2 were the light green, so on and so forth as we go through this. Now, I always say this, when we go from left to right, always, keep track of how many golfers we see inside the top 10, top 20. Usually it's more on the left side going to the right side. So meaning we'd have less over on the right side. But as you can see, we have a ton of top 20 finishes, but really only one, Cam Smith, top 10 finish in this column. So it really didn't fail, but it didn't succeed. You can see all the salaries here. Now Eric Van Rooyen, he was with Wyndham Clark. Wyndham Clark was in the $5 GPP winning lineup, so that means Van Rooyen would have also been, you could have mixed those guys interchangeably. So Van Rooyen could have been there. That's all I'm trying to get at. So you could have had one golfer inside the or in your winning lineup. So okay, actually let's start here. Cam Smith for sure. The $5 GPP winning lineup had Wyndham Clark, like I just told you, but obviously Van Rooyen, you just replace that. But he wasn't in that optimal lineup. Doug Gim was in the optimal lineup. So we still had two golfers from this bucket you wanted to choose from in order to either be in the optimal lineup or in the $5 GPP winning lineup. So we do have two golfers from this bucket. Again, the rules were 1 to 3. We have 14 total golfers. So out of 14, if I were to say just choose two, you could have easily got there. Looking at the next bucket, Louis Oosthuizen was in the optimal lineup. Let's see here. We have a bunch of top 10 finishes, so nothing terrible. I know a lot of people were on Billy Horschel and Sam Burns. They both were in this bucket. But you know me, I usually like to go with a golfer from this section and then combine them with a golfer from here. So my big one with Cam Smith was basically picking... I did do some Wyndham Clark. I did a lot of Jason Kokrak, as did everybody else. A lot of people were on that. I was also, unfortunately, on Will Gordon and Chase Seifert, who missed the cut. Both of them missed the cut. They weren't on the same team. I was just about to say that, but they weren't on the same team. Either way, I was on the wrong guys, but you had Bryce Garnett, who was in that optimal lineup. So let's see here. Where is Bryce? Yeah, Bryce Garnett and Scott Stallings, but we're talking about Bryce. Bryce Garnett was in the optimal lineup. Louis Oosthuizen was in the optimal lineup. So we had, again, I shouldn't say again, but we had two golfers from this group. So Cam Smith, we're going to go with Doug Gim, Louis, and Bryce. So 4 of our 6 golfers in the optimal lineup were in these two buckets. And again, there's 14 in that bucket. In bucket 2, there are 22. So out of 36 golfers, there's still so many possibilities you can do with creating lineups, but still, it's a good starting point. It's always a good starting point going from strokes gained bucket 1 to strokes gained bucket 2, trying to find your favorite plays or what might work with the rest of the buckets. But yeah, you could have gone there pretty easy. As we look at bucket 3, did we have anybody here that was either in the optimal lineup or the GPP winning lineup? I just want to double check. So Keegan Bradley would have been. So he was in the $5 GPP winning lineup. As to was Keith Mitchell. Or not as to. Keith Mitchell was in the optimal lineup. Obviously, he was teamed up with Brandt Snedeker. So again, those you can work those in interchangeably. And then also the $5 winning lineup. Or I forgot to one group of guys. So where is Kyle Stanley? Where are you? He should be with KH Lee. So I have a filter on this somewhere. Where is it? That's why. Okay. There. Okay. I'm sorry. That was confusing. All right. So KH Lee was also a strokes gained bucket 3. So as we go back to this, Kyle Stanley and KH Lee were in the $5 GPP winning lineup, not in the optimal. So that's all I want to get at. But Keegan Bradley in the $5 GPP winning lineup. Keith Mitchell was in the optimal lineup. And then who else do we have? Scott Stallings was also in the optimal lineup. His partner was, I already forgot it off the top of my head. Bryce Garnett. Stallings was with Garnett. So you could have either, went over here and picked someone there, but let's just say we want Bryce Garnett since it kind of fits our narrative. But either way, you could have, and also Adam Schenk was there. So Adam Schenk was in the optimal lineup, as too was Keith Mitchell. I just want to double check, make sure that's correct. So Snedeker, Werenski, Adam Schenk or Doug Gim, Justin Suh. That's what it was. So Schenk was not in the optimal lineup, but he could have been. I mean, he would have been in optimal lineup 2, which scored the same amount of points as optimal lineup number 1. It's just easier to get to optimal lineup 1 than 2. Anyways, that's kind of jumping all over the place. So you could have grabbed some more golfers from here, but really it's just Keith Mitchell that comes from this bucket that was in the optimal lineup. And I just want to double check on that again. And Scott Stallings. I'm sorry. So it was Keith Mitchell and Scott Stallings. They were in the optimal lineup with their teammates. But we have not yet seen Keith Mitchell's lineup or partner. We did see Scott Stallings' partner over here already. So we're going to say nay to Scott Stallings and say yes to Keith Mitchell. So we have 5 of our 6 optimal lineup golfers. Now this was the biggest bucket. This had 39 golfers. So between the two, that was 71 golfers. You only could find 5 out of 6 optimal lineup golfers. The 6 guys over here in bucket 4, that is Brandt Snedeker. Richie Werenski was also in the $5 GPP winning lineup. So again, as we're going left to right, we're still finding success, but it's kind of getting a little smaller. I want to double check on this. Okay, so Werenski was in the optimal lineup as well. Yeah, and we already talked about Keith Mitchell. That's right. I'm sorry. Who was Werenski's Uline? And Uline didn't have the greatest stats either. Okay, so there. We've now completed our strokes gained buckets, and I don't know why I couldn't get there faster. I should have mapped this out before doing this. But Cam Smith, Doug Gim, those were your 2 guys here that were in the optimal lineup. Louis Oosthuizen and Bryce Garnett, those are your other 2. So there's our 4 of 6. Keith Mitchell makes 5 of 6, and Richie Werenski makes 6 of 6 in the optimal lineup. And as we talk, going left to right, we're going to find more on the left. Moving right, and there you go. Optimal lineup works the same way. We see more on the left side going right, but not to deter you, because I mean, Brandt Snedeker was also in that lineup, as too was Peter Uline, who would be in this bucket that I usually say don't ever select from. We just haven't seen that much Peter Uline. He does have strokes gained stats from his PGA events, but I like to use the PGA Tour website. And they have some kind of logic that's implemented that if you haven't, you have to play X amount of events in order for them to show your stats on the website. I'm kind of cool with that. I mean, some of you guys have been reaching out to me saying, hey, you can go to this site and grab information there, or I can give you this information, which I absolutely appreciate 100%. But I think there has to be a limit too, because I like to create 6 buckets. Or I want there to be 6 ranges within a bucket, or whatever we want to call those pieces. But I do want there to be 6. It's universal. It kind of just works really well with the rest of the buckets. And if you think about it, how do I change these buckets, right? Everything's positive, which is kind of an odd bucket if you want to say, I mean, if you think about it, because it also includes, and not so much everything in positive, but anyone here also could be in this bucket, since it's positive off the tee plus positive putting. Now, obviously, I can say this different: positive off the tee plus positive putting plus 1 negative stat from either approach or around the green. I could certainly say that, and that would mean only a certain amount of golfers here, and that's kind of what it entails. That's what this bucket should really be named. But let's say we keep this bucket, or we could split this bucket out a little bit differently, where it's like positive off the tee plus positive approach, and then say positive off the tee plus positive putting, and then the other 2 stats are negative. I don't know. But you can see there's a ton of different combinations that can happen. I mean, I like everything positive. That's easy to figure out. I don't really want to go everything positive but around the green, or everything positive except approach, or everything positive except, well, those would be the two in betweens. Or let's say then the third one's positive off the tee plus positive putting. You know, that to me, I already know a lot of this is kind of going, you know, really layers deep and probably thinking too much into it, but I honestly don't think so. Not to the level that some of you probably think, or some of the criticisms that I've heard in the past from other people doing podcasts. I don't think it's going too far. It is definitely not paralysis by analysis. But if we were going down the route of everything positive except for around the green, everything positive except for putting, or except for approach, and then positive off the tee, positive putting, but negative approach, negative around the green, that to me is way harder to figure out. And I only bring all that up because, again, I'm trying to get to 6 buckets. So having a bucket that has no strokes gain stats is fine. Like, let's say you need at least 3 events of strokes gain stats and they have to be within the last 8 weeks in order to be in this bucket. I'm cool with that because you haven't played enough golf for me to even feel comfortable playing you, even if you either had good stats or let's say you had bad stats and I think you were going to regress, you know, to the positive. Not enough events means I don't want to play you, you know, or not so much I don't want to play you, I don't trust your stats. So that's kind of, I think that's where I'm stuck with. So that was a little bit longer than I cared to explain that, but I hope you guys get the idea. Okay, so we got through strokes gain stats. Let's look at the summary here. Actually, let's go back. I know we already talked about it, but you can see all the colors here, what they represent when it comes to strokes gain stats. Because again, I color coded it this way. Dark green were your strokes gain bucket ones. Everything in this column, you can obviously see that on the screen. Lots of 3s inside the top 10, but all the little black tick marks are your optimal lineups right here. So in this column here, all the little black tick marks. And why don't we just hide this column? That makes it easier to look at everything. So anyways, you can see, you know, orange, yellow, orange, light green, orange, dark green. And really, actually, I should highlight them this way. You can only pick one of these guys out of the duos that you see up there. So obviously for team, you can only pick one golfer from the team. So we can either choose Cam Smith or Mark Leishman. Let's just do Cam Smith. This is easier. Cam Smith was I was more comfortable playing him than I was Mark Leishman. Same would go Louis Oosthuizen over, I have filters somewhere else. Where are they? I'm trying to find Charles Schwartzel. Like, where is he? The one bad thing about having these huge spreadsheets is you can't see where the filters are. At least I don't know if you guys know on Google Sheets to see where your last filter was. That would be wonderful. There we go. Birdie or better. Just tell me. Show me. Is this everybody? This is everybody. Okay. Anyways, just look at all the colors here that we have. And again, I would select here and then go here. I'm more comfortable playing Louis over Charles Schwartzel. I'm more comfortable playing Werenski than I am Peter Uihlein, but obviously Peter Uihlein shows up. And I'm more comfortable playing Keegan Bradley than I am. Well, no, Keegan Bradley wouldn't have been there. I'm more comfortable playing Snedeker over Keith Mitchell. So there would be my 4. So I have 2 strokes gained bucket 4 golfers instead of using Mitchell. And then a 1 strokes gained bucket 1 strokes gained bucket 2. But if we scroll down and find our other guys down here, I'm more comfortable playing Gim and Scott Stallings and Bryce Garnett. Look at their rankings, 98, 99. I would say I'm okay with choosing either of them. I probably like Garnett's stats all the way across, but I don't care. We could choose this. So, I mean, we would have selected 2 or 1 strokes gained bucket 3 golfer, 2 strokes gained bucket 1s, 2 strokes gained bucket 4s. Am I missing somebody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, I'm not. So 2 4s, 2 1s, a 2, and a 3. All right. Let's go to the bucket system summary. Here is, I mean, if you were with me during the strategy video, we struggled making lineups trying to follow some of these rules. But our number one rule that we tried to follow is we looked at this bucket here, primarily because it had the highest success rate. So if you look at all of the buckets, all right here, the highest success rate out of all of the buckets, we looked at the average, amount that falls in this bucket per year, and it's 4.86. 4 was close enough. It's still under, and my rule would be not to select anybody, or not to not select anybody, but to be leery that if this number is lower than that, the rules aren't really going to follow. But 26.67% of 4 golfers, that gives us a projected amount of golfers, just a projected 1 golfer to show up inside the top 10. So if we go to 2021, our number 1 golfer is Cam Smith. If we go ahead and select all 4s here, we can see it did pretty good. This bucket it's a high success rate bucket. So when we go forward with this, we actually have 2 this year that showed up inside the top 10. Now, Jon Rahm was too expensive to be in the optimal lineup. But, we still have 2, which is amazing. And Cam Smith, that's the guy that, I did select him in some of my lineups. If we go back to the 2021 lineup construction page that I dusted off for the strategy videos, you can see like Jon Rahm, Cam Smith. Those were my 2. I started with those golfers. And then you can see Charlie Hoffman, Chris Kirk. These were the 4 lineups I started with. You can see some of these other ones. Cam Smith ended up being this Charlie Hoffman lineup. But either way, if we started with that, we weren't dead in the water when the cut happened, unlike the other buckets. Now, we went from this bucket, if I go back to the summary, we looked for the next best success rate, 24.07, which were our course history 5s. 8 of them are in the field this week. Usually on average, we see 10, but if we do all the math, we can project somewhere between, 1.92, and also the least amount of times we saw it inside the top 10 was once. If we go to this year and take a look, our course history bucket 5 golfers, 11th place. So this bucket failed to produce a top 10 for the first time from its entire history going back to 2013. But we missed it by 1 place. Or I should say the bucket missed by 1 place. So it's still a very good bucket. Xander was very close to making it happen. But at 11-7, that's something that's really difficult to do. We can see who our other golfers are. 8-6 and 8-7. Kevin Kisner, Scott Brown. Those are 8-7 golfers. That kind of screwed me in one of the tournaments that I was doing pretty decent in. I don't know why I backed them. I wasn't that high on them to begin with, but I thought to myself, with the rules in place, I kind of want to make sure I grab one of these guys. But in all honesty, KH Lee would have been the pick. And I told you, the optimizer for me, select a lot of KH Lee. I just was very leery of it. I didn't trust it because I'm like, KH Lee, I don't want KH Lee in my lineups. I was much more comfortable anchoring my lineups with Xander. But still, we need to mix it up a little bit. I played every one of these golfers in at least one of my lineups. And again, the biggest disappointment would have been this group. Hank Lebioda, I mean, why play Hank Lebioda? He has had very marginal success at this event. I don't know why. I should have just stuck with basically anybody under, say, 50 on the sweet spot score, and I would have been just fine. And we could have included Graham McDowell being 51. That would have been fine. Well, I guess if I do that, I still have the possibility of doing Kevin Kisner. Either way, just mixing it up would be the best way to go about. Let's go to the next bucket. Can't remember which one it was. Let's see. Recent form bucket 3. So this would have been the next one, and as we look at it, we see that the minimum, the least amount that this was going to actually, I shouldn't say that. Over the last, from 2013 to 2020, we have seen this bucket show up at least twice every single year. If we go to 2021 and look and get rid of this one, go to recent form bucket 3. Look at that. Look how many golfers showed up inside the top 10. We had 4. So the recent form buckets, let's say this. Recent form bucket 4 was definitely the number 1 bucket we should have followed. Recent form bucket 3 would have been the second bucket to follow because those ones had a pretty decent success rate. And we actually see 5 less in this bucket than we do on average, but it still turned out to be one of the best buckets to follow or to use. And again, looking at that 2021 DK page, I mean, it's pretty good. Not terrible to follow. I didn't like Colin Morikawa because I didn't like Matthew Wolff, and obviously Matthew Wolff really sunk that team. Sung J M I liked. I did play some Cameron Tringali, but I wasn't a huge favorite. These 2 guys probably hurt me the most. Michael Thompson and Chase Seifert. They were easy fillers at 7,600, 7,500, but probably should look at some of the top guys in this bucket. This would have been a bucket to choose your high price guys over some of the lower price guys. Harold Varner to me didn't deserve the 9,600 price tag. I would definitely put Louis Oosthuizen over him. I would put Brendan Steele and Keegan Bradley over him. I think Sung Jae should have been over him as well, but obviously miscut. Let's not get into the specifics too much. I tend to do this, but this was a bucket we could have easily grabbed some golfers from. And obviously Louis Oosthuizen shows up inside it. The other buckets kind of got a little difficult. And if you're with me in the strategy video, I was trying to create some lineups. I was starting to struggle. The next bucket was last week bucket 3s. That kind of had the next highest. Course history 4s did, but I ended up going with last week bucket 3s as my next bucket. We only had 10 in this year, 14.43 average. We kind of projected 1.5 to be inside the top 10. If we take a look at last week bucket 4s, did that even show up at all? Just 1. 1.5 is what we projected. We were close. Bryce Garnett and Brant Snedeker were both in the optimal lineup. So this bucket also worked. You just have to pick the right golfers, obviously. And I liked Seifert. Thompson, I already talked about those guys. I didn't really care about anybody else. And then there's KH Lee as well. And again, KH Lee was in the $5 GPP winning lineup. Actually, his partner was Kyle Stanley, but it wouldn't have mattered. You could have picked KH Lee. So you could have 3 golfers from here. So even if I were to choose this bucket as my third one, it didn't hurt me. So it's kind of just proving to you like the bucket system, it works. How do I want to phrase this? I hate making declaratives to try to sell something. But to me, obviously you guys have already seen it. We went through a few of these buckets and they all ended up meeting expectations. So this was a bucket that I was kind of iffy on. And it ended up working out. 1.5 was a projection. We got 1, but that other guy was in 11th place. He was really close. And 3 of the guys from that bucket ended up either being in the GPP lineup, winning lineup, or the optimal lineup. I'm not going to go through all of them, but last week bucket 3 and I guess course history 4 is what I didn't talk about this, but looking at the success rate, having more golfers in that bucket this year, I think that's one that we should have been looking at. So I'm going to look at course history bucket 4. So we have seen at least 2 every single year. Did we do it this year? Oh yeah, we see 4. Wow. Yeah, that would have been a good bucket to choose from. I don't know why I did not talk about that. 2 of our guys up here in the optimal lineup. Obviously, it just makes you like the Cam Smith, Mark Leishman lineup more. Makes you like Louis more. This should have been the 3rd bucket to look at, and we probably would have got to Louis that way because we've saw him, twice in these buckets. You can see how some of these cheap golfers down here. Gosh, Brandon Grace shouldn't have been 9,600. That is crazy. Last week, bucket 3 was the next one, I think. So just showing you these guys. We didn't talk about those guys in the strategy video because I just kind of overlooked it. We had 2 from this bucket. What did we have as a last week? But was it? Wait. Did we already look at these guys? No, we didn't. But I think I highlighted them. Yeah, we did look at these guys. Last week, bucket 4 is what I want to be looking at. Yeah, because I looked at last week bucket 4 in the strategy video. So let's go look. One guy. Oh, we already talked about these guys too. I'm losing it, man. Like I said, I had a very busy weekend. So like the brain is all over the place. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to talk about the bucket system outside of that. A lot of these things popped for the bucket system. And had we followed it, and picked the right golfers, we could have gotten there. It's just how do we, right? Like this team event to me was very interesting because you could have chosen anybody in the team for whatever reason. So if you like Cam Smith because he was a strokes gained bucket 1 golfer, that would be enough reason to play this group. But if you liked Mark Leishman because he's a recent form bucket 1 golfer, that was another reason, It didn't matter which one it was. I'm only picking 6 golfers. I'm not really considering the teammates. But let's say we did like Cam Smith, and then our next one to go to was Louis Oosthuizen. I mean, just with those price tags alone, meaning we would had to go to other prices, and I guarantee you, I bet you the optimizer would have gotten there. I didn't. The summary again for me was I went from recent form bucket 4. That was my number 1 bucket, the one I have highlighted on the screen. And then the second bucket, again, it was kind of an oversight. I mean, I looked at course history bucket 5. And I probably shouldn't have been looking at course history bucket 5 above course history bucket 4. Now, 5 is the higher the number, the worse the play. But like for me, I should have looked at just for what it was worth. Course history 5, it's ranked 5 for a reason. We're not going to get that many top 10 plays. Therefore, it's probably not the bucket that you really want it to be your second option. That's something that I should have thought about. Likewise, or not so much likewise, but I feel like I didn't want to go to course history bucket 4 because there were 24 golfers in it, and it was probably too much to try to pick from. I was trying to limit my plays by looking at the smaller amount of golfers, the smaller buckets basically is what I was trying to look for. So like recent form bucket 4, there were only 4 golfers in it. Course history 5, there were only 8 golfers in it. And perhaps I should have been looking at, should have been looking at these 24s, and going from there. It'd have been probably the smarter way to do things. But anyways, I am kind of rambling, so let me see what else to cover. I think that's probably going to be it, if I'm going to be honest. To me, the bucket system worked out beautifully. Oh, no. I always do this. I always get to this part of the video and I forget. We're going to look at all the top 20 stats. So I'm going to go and scroll over. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Bermuda golfers. So if we just sort by Bermuda top to bottom, and why don't we go ahead and freeze this up to column Y. and scroll over. This will give us an easier way to look at these stats. So best Bermuda top to bottom, I think that was a stat to go with. Colin Morikawa, unfortunately, was with Matthew Wolff. That doesn't help. Sung J M, that's surprising. He's one of the better Bermuda golfers. But he was playing with Benny Ann. Alternate shot can get you, and I think it got them pretty bad. Kevin Kisner with Scott Brown. They didn't have a very good Thursday. Like they didn't score that well on Thursday, which was the best ball. That's where everyone scores low in these team events. And then obviously alternate shot, just not the caliber of golfers you want. Like Scott Brown is a really good friend of Kevin Kisner, but not a great partner to have. I know they got second place here once, but yeah, Scott Brown's game is diminishing fast. Looking at our top 10 Bermuda percentages, obviously Colin Morikawa is still up there, but you see a lot of green, a lot of top 11s, pretty close to top 10s. So Bermuda was a stat you should have definitely been looking after. Unfortunately, all of our optimal lineup guys, this is a good reason to pick Oosthuizen and Schwartzel. They're the best team that was up there. So unfortunate that we're looking at this in kind of hindsight, but yeah, those three guys are there. Snedeker wasn't too far down the list. I didn't even look at the optimal lineup golfers here. We had three. Snedeker ended up being up there. Leishman was up there. Oosthuizen. That was easy, right? Could have found three golfers right there that follow all the buckets that we could have gone through. Overall die. It's spotty. We figured this out from our last tournament. That was Pete Dye, which now I can't remember off the top of my head. RBC Heritage the week before. Duh. So we found that out at the RBC Heritage. It's not that big of a factor anymore. I don't know if it's even worth looking at. We do have some top 10 finishes, enough. We only have one that was in the optimal lineup. We have a couple more down here in the optimal lineup, but not a lot of events under their belts. You know, Doug Gim only has 5 Pete Dye events, but 20% top 10 percent finishes in Pete Dye golf course. If we do sort, yeah, this also does. Like, this isn't good enough. I'm looking at this column, and if you see that many missed cuts, I mean, we can get rid of our out here. When you have that many missed cuts in the top 20, of the stat, it's not a good stat to go by. Let's go ahead and we can look at all of our strokes gained. This is just for you guys. I typically cover this in the strokes gained stats, like the strokes gained buckets. You can see tee to green. That's a good stat to go by because obviously your best golfers are going to be there. Off the tee, a lot of top 10s here. One golfer that was in the optimal lineup, and that's it for off the tee, which is crazy. And again, this is the top 20 of the off the tee stat. So who is inside the top 20 for this field for off the tee? I have that on the screen now. Now we'll look at the approach guys. One guy in the GPP winning lineup, 2 guys in the optimal lineup. Scott Stallings and Doug Gim, so not a terrible stat to go by. Around the green, 1, 2, 3 optimal lineups, and then 2 GPP winning lineups. But when we look at all the top 10s and missed cuts, that ends up being another volatile one as well. And then if you look at our putting stat, I mean, Justin Suh was at the top, and it was weird. PGA Tour has some weird stats going on right now. Well, just for putting, the putting category, it has not updated past the Honda Classic, so it's the putting stat might be a little misconstrued, but we have 4 golfers that are inside the top 10. Or I should say 4 golfers inside the top 20 of the stat that are in the optimal lineup. But it's not a very good, other than that, which is good, by the way, that's still good. Other than that, not a lot of top 10 finishes, a lot of missed cuts. So those are stats that are kind of hard to go by. Tee to green probably looked like the best, and approach wasn't that bad or wasn't that too far off. If I go ahead and just look at finishing position and just look at these stats, you know, I like looking at, bogey avoidance, birdie or better. Those were stats that I had included in the scoring model to get the sweet spot rank. Driving distance didn't look like it was that big of a deal. Green in these categories is good. Red, not so much. Yellow is right in the middle. So we see more green, for a lot of these stats than we see any other color. But it's not decisive. It's not like we should check every bogey avoidant golfer, or not check, but choose from all the best bogey avoidant golfers. Because, how do you get to, let's see here, like Keith Mitchell, that's pretty high, as is Brandt Snedeker, that's very high as well. And he doesn't have the greatest birdie or better percentage. So how can we get to Brandt Snedeker if we, look at these stats? Now, Brandt Snedeker's partner is Keith Mitchell. Again, how do we get to those guys just looking at those stats? You don't really. You have to mix and match. So that's why I like the bucket system. It allows you to do that. And I think that's about it. I don't know if there's anything else that I need to discuss or go over. Those were your top 20 in stats. So let's get out of here. I was hoping this was going to be faster than 45 minutes, but you know me. Always go on tangents and talk about certain things and get off course. But either way, next week is the Valspar, I believe. And then the Travelers after that, which is another Pete Dye golf course. But at least we're going back to a normal event. We can talk about normal things. This week for me, I felt like the bucket system actually was spot on. I shouldn't say actually. It's usually spot on with some discrepancies. Like instead of finishing inside the top 10 for one of the buckets, it was 11th or 12th, like really close. But for the most part, it does very well. And for this tournament, I think it was 100% accurate. Especially for the buckets that I was looking at to build lineups. And I think that's why I made, my money back plus some, because, I follow the buckets whenever creating lineups. It worked out this week. Anyways, I'll see you guys for the Valspar Championship. I'll get a preview video out tomorrow. Usually find it around 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, got that 9 to 5 job. Have to, do that stuff. And then I work on all of my fantasy stuff to get a preview out for you as quick as I can. And usually 10 p.m. Central Standard Time is the fastest that I can get it out. So you can expect to see that tomorrow around that time. But yeah, that's all I got for you. So thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in that preview video. All right, bye.